Welcome to a brand new show, System Overload How Change Happens. I'm your host, Kai D. Wright, and I'll steer a conversation between two of the best business strategists to help demystify a subject we encounter daily, yet rarely are taught how to deal with change. For the next 30 minutes, today's guest will offer case studies and frameworks on a topic facing a widespread reset: leadership and organizational design. I'm joined by Dr. Laura Morgan Roberts and Bob Liodice. Dr. Laura Morgan Roberts is an associate professor at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. She has also served on the faculties of Harvard Business School, Georgetown University, and Antioch University. She's a frequent contributor to Harvard Business Review and has edited 3 books: Race, Work, and Leadership, which we'll talk a little bit about today, Positive Organizing in a Global Society, and Exploring Positive Identities and Organizations. Bob Liodice serves as the president and CEO of the Association of National Advertisers, the ANA, where he's led the advertising, marketing, and media industry for nearly 30 years. His association helps guide 1,600 member companies representing 10,000 brands and more than 200 billion in marketing spend. He is co-chair of the ANA Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, as well as several industry boards such as GARM, the Global Alliance for Responsible Media. Welcome, Dr. Laura Morgan Roberts and Bob Liodice.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
So glad to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have over the next 25 minutes. Let's start off with some icebreakers just to warm our audience up a little bit about how you, as strategists, think about change. When we think about the barriers that exist within system change or organizational design, maybe we can start there with a quick point of view. Let's start with Dr. Roberts. What's the hardest part of change and why?
The hardest part of change is the social aspect of change. It's the implication of change for how I identify, how I feel I'm connected to other people in the organization, and fundamentally, my own sense of capability to navigate a new reality.
All right. And Bob, what do you think?
I think that influencing behavior and having yourself and others move in a different direction after probably a long period of comfort is most important for us to be able to recognize. And behavioral change is not easy, particularly when the outcomes and the results and the environment have in fact been relatively comfortable. But moving in an aggressive new direction is essentially what the imperative is. To do change is to be able to get better. And we need to get out of our comfort zone to be able to get there.
All right. So thinking about getting out of our comfort zone, Bob, I'd like to start this next question with you.
Sure.
When it comes to the mindset of a modern leader or a leader that is trying to future-proof themselves, what does getting out of their comfort zone involve? What type of mindset should they have?
That's a very important question because leadership is about getting out of your comfort zone. It's being distinguished and distinctive in terms of your point of view of how to be able to lead the change efforts, whether it's within your own particular company or whether it's within your broader industry environment. And if you're going to influence, which is what we do a lot of, I mean, that's the essence of marketing, is to influence that level of change. You need to be distinctive. So what's a leader's point of view? How is it different from his particular peer set? How does that differentiate some of the core strategies that may be underlying a respective organization or company? And it's important because otherwise, if you kind of just melt into the pablum of what we do day to day, you're never going to reach that level of distinguished characteristics that I think are so important to define an impressive leader.
All right. Distinguished and different. I love it. Dr. Roberts, what about you? What do you think about the mindset of a leader should be?
I think the mindset about leading change definitely embraces the experience of discomfort, as Bob is highlighting. And it has to also communicate some level of urgency and enthusiasm around moving into uncharted terrain, so to speak. I mean, we know that successful change initiatives have to engender some dissatisfaction with the status quo throughout the entire organization or system, that we've got to motivate, inspire, mobilize people to change what they're doing, how they're doing it, and then to embrace a new vision for where we might go and feel engaged in a process of getting there. Here's the trick though with mindset, the vision is going to continue to change and evolve over time. So we're always going to be on our learning edge. Change is inherently destabilizing. What people want from leaders is a vision, a roadmap. Tell me where we're going, how we're going to get from point A to point B. Help me feel capable in this space so I know exactly what I'm supposed to do in this new reality, right? And then they feel more secure and comfortable in moving along into the new direction. Not all, we have some resistance, we can talk about that. But by and large, I'm feeling more comfortable if I feel like at least the leader knows where they're going and they're going to guide and direct the rest of us along the way. But here's the other trick with the mindset, the vision changes. It evolves over time. And so we have to remain on that learning edge of discovery so that we can move into this new future state.
All right. I am going to build and push the both of you to unpack some of those very massive gems and nuggets that you just gave us as we continue for the next 20 minutes. We're going to get into what that comfort discomfort shift may look like. We're going to get into what destabilization might mean, how you fight some of the fear that exists within an organization or within certain leader committees, and some of the best practices that you've seen so that we can keep focal point on what that vision could lead us to, and especially the impact that it can have.
Sure.
All right. Thank you for those great warm-ups. Now I'd like to focus in on some of the work that you do, Dr. Roberts. You've had an illustrious career over the past 20 years teaching at a number of top universities, a wide variety of different types of students, individuals that are managers, individuals that are senior executives, and individuals just starting off in their careers. And through your organization alignment quest, also get a chance to consult with many different leaders. So there's one concept that you have to be confronted with often, and that is definitions and lexicon. So let's level set what we mean in terms of some of these big concepts that we tackle on this show: diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, accessibility, and there's an endless number of acronyms. You were part of LinkedIn's top 10 voices for equity. And I think you have a pretty good grasp on all these definitions that individuals use across social media and in articles. And so the question that I have for you is, does the term matter? And if so, which term should organizations like associations, industry bodies, companies, agencies adopt? What does that name that they use imply? What are your
Oh, the
thoughts?
term matters. All of the terms matter. I mean, words are powerful. They have such incredible meaning, and you know that everyone who works in this industry is keenly aware of the power of words and the meaning that they connote, right? So it really depends on the priorities for the organization, for the community, for the school, and then using the term that will embody the initiative that's going to address the challenge or tap into the opportunity. So I call this bringing your A game. And depending on which element of your A game you're trying to address, you might focus on a different aspect of the work. So, if you're trying to address challenges with respect to access in education, access to jobs, access to ongoing training, professional development, that would be diversity. If we're trying to create a stronger culture of organizational inclusion, belonging, then we're focusing on authenticity, helping people to feel they can bring their best full selves to work. If we really want to hone in on bias and fairness in organizations, performance evaluation, leadership development, promotion, advancement, pay, then we're talking about equity. If we want to talk about the power dynamics that impact organizations and societies more broadly and determine who gets in positions of leadership, how they're rewarded, who's penalized when they violate the norms that have been established by our leadership or by our community, we're talking about justice. And that speaks to questions of authority and accountability. So, if we're bringing our A game, we obviously want to address all of these different barriers. But as we talked earlier, leading change is challenging, and it's especially difficult to try to address all of these different initiatives at the same time. So we do need to focus our energy, focus our resources on the area in which we think is presenting the greatest need or the greatest opportunity for us at the time.
I love that. Thank you. Make sure as leaders we bring our A game and we bring our intention, right? In terms of which part of the equation we're trying to solve first. And just as a quick follow up question, some individuals might say, well, can you juggle all of them at one time? So, what is your sense? Is it good to focus on one as a primary, have a secondary, or to split efforts across all four areas? What do you think generally works best, Dr. Roberts?
Okay, that's a little bit of a trick question because they're interrelated, which also points out a little bit of the fallacy in my framework, that we talk about these different words, we use these different words, and we talk about these initiatives as points of emphasis, but they are all interrelated. I mean, can you really have a diverse organization if you're not also focusing on experiences of inclusion and belonging within the organization? Probably not. Many people would say you need to build a foundation of equity, inclusion, and justice before you start hiring a number of people who don't fit the prototype or the majority group that's represented in the organization. So, if we had to prioritize, I would prioritize on creating a more equitable and inclusive culture and then move into the access conversations. But often organizations and industries approach it from the reverse: hire, 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 try to get the numbers listed on the books in a way that makes us seem like we're building a different type of organization, but the internal workings of the organization have not changed. That's where a lot of the resistance really comes in, is in changing the culture, the mindsets, the behaviors of the organization, as we've been talking about today.
Thank you so much. We often see that pipeline is one of those areas many organizations go to, and I think it highlights maybe some of the friction of change or some of the things that start to take down the momentum of progress if that internal culture is not perfectly aligned with the values. All right, Bob,
Yeah, sure.
with your seat at the ANA, as well as the many different organizations like the Ad Council and GARM and the World Federation of Advertisers that you serve on, you're in a lot of rooms. And as Hamilton said, I want to be in the room where it happens, right? That's where all the power is. And so if you think about some of the points of friction that may come up or resistance that Dr. Roberts mentioned in terms of change, I have a very poignant question for you,
Sure.
which is we kind of see this backlash with change in terms of one of two things. People either think that the playing field is now even and there's not a lot of work that needs to be done additionally, or we are in this time of wokeism. And so we have these two kind of, I think, extremes of nothing needs to happen to everything is happening all at once and it's overwhelming and it's too much. What do you say? How do you have a conversation with a leader that thinks DEI is just hype or wokeism?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a multidimensional response to that, because DE&I is such a huge and an important arena, and I think every leader now recognizes how important it is. But it needs to step way out of the rhetoric that we've had maybe a decade and even more so ago, and into tangible actions. And so there are two, we'll call it very large buckets, at least within the marketing community, that we need to address. First of all, how are we organized? Are we diverse? Do we provide equity? Do we have elements of inclusion in the way that we are organized and in the way that we manage ourselves? Because every study that I've come across suggests strongly that when you have a diverse organization and an inclusive organization, you manage yourselves better. You get better business results. And I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that the more diverse that you can become, the better your opportunity for your brands and your businesses to be successful. Now, as we think about the marketing community, how do we extend that into the work that we do? Well, through several of organizations that the ANA has created, one being AIM, which is the Alliance for Inclusive and Multicultural Marketing, and the other, CHER, which is focused in on gender equity and equality, we've recognized that the way we manage our advertising is to ensure the appropriate representation and takeaway of our cultures, our fairness in gender, to ensure that we are building that and blending that into our advertising and marketing, because that appropriate representation in our ads suggests a lot about the way we are represented in our core beliefs as brands, and then importantly, in the performance of those brands in driving the business and brand results, which is the reason why marketers are in business. And we've had to learn how to empirically measure how effective that is, because we do know empirically that when you express diversity in your advertising and your marketing, you do get better business performance. But how do we know that? And we've had to move into a realm of greater scientific and measurement approaches to ensure that that fairness and equity comes through our advertising, and that in fact your brands are doing what they need to do to perform better and to embrace DE&I.
Yeah, thank you for guiding us in those areas. So making sure that we're being mindful on the front end, making sure that we have the right measurement on the back end, so that we can actually close that feedback loop in terms of the impact that we've had. Bob, one follow-up question for you. So
Sure.
every year, the best marketers, right, in the world gather for ANA Masters. I've had a chance to attend the conference multiple times and see it in person and experience the culture and the ambiance of individuals sharing a lot of those struggles, best practices, how they're measuring, some of the newer things that they're doing. When you think about strategies that may be working for DE&I, and specifically to fill gaps in management, because I know that that has been an area of measurement, and we're going to get into some of the measurement that the ANA and AIM specifically has done in the report that was released in November. But are there any strategies that are go-to or that have you seen highly effective that have been brought up by different members?
Yeah, and I love what Dr. Roberts talked about before in terms of ensuring that you have the appropriate culture within your organization. It can't be a bolt-on. It can't be artificial. It has to be real, and it has to be embraced by the totality of the organization. And I like to point out specifically one of, I think, the great champions in our industry today, which is Procter & Gamble, led by Mark Pritchard. I think he's just done a magnificent job embracing that in such a way that their internal championship is about being a force for growth and a force for good. And at the heart of that is an embracing of DE&I as a core philosophy. But it has to be more than just the words. And that is what has permeated throughout the culture of Procter & Gamble and into their respective advertising, to where in many instances they have put out long-form videos that identify the specific challenges that are embraced by DE&I and how we can go about solving them, and how we break down the barriers that Dr. Roberts so eloquently talked about before. because there are barriers. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. We haven't reached utopia yet. We still have a long way to go. And if we relentlessly pursue those barriers as a part of our core advertising and marketing strategies, as a part of our core human resource strategies, then in fact you can effectuate the change that is absolutely necessary to go from culture to advertising to business results, to get what it is that we need in society and in terms of overall economic growth.
Yeah, really good example. And I think for anyone that is tuning in, that work, some of it that Bob is referencing from P&G, such as The Talk and other things that are Emmy winning, that really tell inclusive stories in the voice and perspective of the audiences, right? Makes it concrete, makes it visible, makes it core to the business strategy. I think those are some really strong takeaways, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Roberts, you do a lot of research around identity and the intersection of identity, work, and leadership. So I would love to unpack some of the research that you found and some of the takeaways that you have. In general, can you ground us in what's that relationship between identity, work, and leadership?
Well, let's build on the theme of storytelling. Because I think that's been a powerful part of our conversation. Identities are, in large part, stories. They're stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. They're stories that we tell other people about who we are. They're stories that other people tell about us. We have identities as individuals. We also have identities as social groups, as collectives. And so the identity work is recrafting, shaping, changing those stories. When it comes to DE&I talk to leaders about the power and the importance of flipping the script. And I'm talking about identity work here. When we're talking about flipping the script at the foundation, I have to first flip the script on the way that I think about myself. How am I tapping into, identifying, and activating my best self? Then I flip the script in terms of what I thought I knew and understood about other people and about the way that the world works. I become more actively engaged and because I'm curious to learn from and learn across dimensions of difference. I want to look at that Dove ad campaign and understand why the Crown Act is so important right now so that we can prevent the ongoing discrimination that many workers, primarily women of color, but not exclusively women of color, have faced when they've been told that wearing their hair the way it grows naturally out of their head is quote unquote unprofessional. So these mediums that we're talking about here and the campaigns are one venue through which we can learn from and learn across difference. But we have so many opportunities to do that. There's data that shows that the vast majority, and I'm talking 85 to 90% of white individuals in the United States have one or zero Black friends. So we don't understand, we're not able to connect across difference. We certainly are going to struggle in the workplace with integrated teams when we're trying to create equitable systems that acknowledge, address, and meet the needs of the diverse members of those teams. Then we can move into the conversations that we started with today, leading organizational change, transforming society. If I am feeling destabilized, insecure, anxious, incapable about this moving into this new vision for society, back to the foundation, I'm not activating my best self. I'm not tapping into my highest potential, and I'm certainly not enthusiastic or able to bring out the best in other individuals in my organization. I move into an ego defensive zone. I see the world in an us versus them framework. It's a zero sum game, not a win win game. And therefore, I'm not able to move myself or move my organization forward in a broader and more aligned vision of transformation. So the work starts with me and it cascades up and out from there.
All right. And thank you for that framework. Anyone that is interested in looking more into that relationship between identity, work in leadership should read the book that is also under the same title, that has been edited and written by Dr. Laura Morgan Roberts. And I believe some of your research and work is also on alignmentquest.com. So that's a place that individuals can go to find out more. There's something that you said that really struck a chord with me in terms of change helps all people. And that sometimes you have to flip the script in order to do that. When it comes to things like accessibility, we find that if you put in, for instance, a wheelchair ramp, as opposed to just having stairs to lead into buildings, many individuals will opt to use that accessibility feature. And I think that is how we have to think about change as leaders, which is the one change may have the intention of supporting, helping, amplifying one group, but it may be beneficial for many other groups. That is a benefit. There is one thing that you said at the beginning of the call around destabilizing and not being afraid to destabilize. And at the World Economic Forum, their Sustainable Development Impact Summit of 2020, you talked about this notion of destabilizing the dominant group. Mm-hmm. And that's often the work in a nutshell of what DE&I think is trying to do, right? To make sure that other voices are amplified and treated with equity. So one last question that I have for both of you, and this will be a quick question in terms of, two-part question. Dr. Roberts, as a follow-up for you, when it comes to accountability of identity and work and leadership, whose responsibility is it to create a more inclusive culture? An employer, an employee, or a university that might be sending people into the workforce?
Can I say all of the above?
You can say all of the above. All right. And then, Bob, I have a quick question for you in terms of the report that the ANA just released in November 2022. I highly recommend everyone go and download it. It is available at ana.net/diversity. You can find it there. We'll make sure to put a link in this video recap also. What's one major takeaway or highlight from the report?
Yeah, I think the key that we have been including in the report for the last 5 years is that we get at truly an understanding of how diverse our universe is. And this is critically important and has been critically important for years because we've always talked about the rhetoric of diversity, but never backed it up with true quantification to say how well we're performing against the standards that we would like us to see and have better behavior. And what I'm very, very pleased about in this report is that as long as it took to get to a recognition of how important diversity is, we are now backing that up with actual data that is saying that our marketing community is becoming more diverse. And we're finally starting to see that the recognition is that 32% of the client-side marketer community is diverse. And that is a far cry from where we were 4 or 5 years ago when we were at 26 and 27%. So it's no longer just talk, it's actually actions that are taking hold. With that being said, the one gap that I think is a significant gap is that our leadership still has not become diverse. Only 12% of CMOs are diverse. And this report highlights the fact that if in fact we're going to truly achieve the vision and mission of diversity, that our leadership needs to become more diverse, because in that way that we can identify the behaviors and actions and steps necessary to provide for a more responsible environment that will lead to better outcomes throughout our ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, for highlighting where there is a silver lining in terms of progress and where there is a gap in terms of putting some of that intentionality and action that Dr. Roberts has mentioned, right? Where we can flip the script and push and advocate for even more change. I'd like to thank both of our guests, Dr. Laura Morgan Roberts, for joining, as well as Bob Liodice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can read a recap of our conversation or replay this episode at adage.com/system overload. And join us for more discussions between senior executives and the best business thinkers in the world to unpack how change happens through system overload. Let's get to work.